are now entering a random universe of creativity, collaboration, and sharing. That is my attempt to create a unique hello sign-on for every and all episode. I think I'm going to have to make that one the last attempt. Hello, my fellow randoms. You are now in that special universe where we can create and collaborate together and learn from each other's efforts. My name is Kev Duffy, and welcome to this, our 17th episode of What's Your Random Podcast, where I discover and celebrate individual and independent creativity from the inception of an idea to the process and the practicalities of bringing it to life. You have an idea in your head, but how do you get it out of your head? How do you get it onto paper? How do you get it onto some other medium so that you can share it with others? How do you articulate these ideas in a way that you can share them with others? That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom to over the course of my interviews on this podcast. I thank you for your support so far. We are at 17 episodes today on our quest to 20 in 2020. And I think we're gonna do it. And I'm really excited. This was a goal I set for myself. And there wasn't a terrible amount of time to get up and running and get this completed. I started in the middle of October or beginning of October, maybe. And yeah, now we're here on our way to 20 in 2020. And I thank you all very much for listening. I also thank you if you subscribed on your favorite podcast catcher, and extra thanks if you're able to share an episode, because as I have said over and over, and you're probably tired hearing, that really is the best way for us to capture a wider audience and tap into the ears of other creative listeners. And hopefully those people can benefit from listening to my guests and what my guests have to share. So enough of the quote unquote advertising, aka promotion of the podcast that you're listening to now, and on to the guest. My guest today is Chris Moses. He is the creator and writer of the Saturn Effect. It is a webcomic, a 3-part webcomic that still has issues coming out. And then Saturn Effect Alpha is the first physical book that was successfully funded on Kickstarter and has a release date of the first quarter of 2020, I think actually January or February. And Chris is looking to kickstart the second issue in a 8-issue series in February. So keep an eye out for that. It's shaping up to be a very unique take on the sci-fi genre. Not that I'm an expert, but from what I've seen and engaged with so far, Chris's work certainly fits into the pantheon as something quite original. I had a fun time chatting with Chris. So instead of talking about it more, I'm just going to introduce my guest again. Joining me on What's Your Random today is Chris Moses to talk about his comic and his developing universe of the Saturn Effect. Enjoy the random. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm surviving, man. Surviving the Ronaverse. You know how it goes. 2020, almost 2021. So,
and crazy news with potential mutation in England today. That's news that just dropped and kind of shook a lot of people's worlds.
Yes, definitely concerning, but I don't think it should be unexpected. I mean, you know, considering the nature of coronaviruses and things like that. I mean, stuff that we have to be prepared for. I mean, don't want to get too much into coronavirus, but I mean, you know, that's just life, man. You know, we just things happen. You gotta try and make it work and get things done and hustle and figure it out. So, I mean, that's the story of humanity, right?
Yeah. Well, that is a good message to start today's episode with. And correct me if I do pronounce your name wrong, because this is the first time that we're speaking to each other
totally.
in real life. Chris Moses.
Yes,
Yes.
perfect.
And Chris is the mastermind behind the Saturn Effect universe. Saturn Effect is a collection of web comics, and Chris just successfully kickstarted and successfully funded his first. Is this going to be your first print version?
Yes, it'll be the first
Yes.
thing that of this universe of, and actually my first printed comic as well. So yeah,
Very
pretty
cool. Well,
exciting.
congratulations. We were actually
Thank you.
scheduled to chat on the eve of closing his Kickstarter, but weather had other
Yes.
plans for
No.
us.
Yeah, unfortunately. But here we are, ready to take it on one more time.
Yep. Yeah. So congratulations again,
Thank you.
and you can do a better job of introducing your project than I can. So
Well,
build off of what I already said.
for sure, you did a pretty good job to start off. I mean, it's a growing universe. We have 3 issues already for free on our website at thesaturneffect.com that I did with an awesome Italian artist named Jacopo Callisti. He's a great dude. And as you said, we've recently kickstarted and we're successful, and we passed the goal by pretty substantial amount from what we started, and so we're doing pretty well. And that's another book that I did with Francesco Mazzoli and Marco D'Alessandro, for who was on colors, and they're really awesome, and they're also Italian. And yeah, and so we're growing from there, and so we have some other stuff in the works that hopefully we'll be able to show soon. If anyone watching today or tomorrow is wants to participate in our poll that we have going on our Instagram right now, you can vote for the second cover of TAC Alpha 2. So just type either 1 or 2 in the comments or send me a message, and you'll have your influence, and you'll see which one ends up on top in February.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a lot of fun to have that sort of community involvement. And is that something that guided your? Well, maybe we could start from the beginning, and you
Mhm.
can tell me. You could go back as far as you want and start to tell me where the idea came from and how you got started with your first 3 issues. So many
Okay.
questions in my mind. I don't know which one to ask
That's
first.
totally fine. I won't go back too far, but I'd been, I'd written for or wanted to write for a long time. So, and, a lot of friends from, high school, college, and even after college know about me, like writing something and sending to them and wanting their opinions. So I wasn't necessarily new to like wanting an audience for something that I've written. And so I had just recently graduated from college, and I was looking for, an outlet, and I had written a screenplay, and I realized quickly that like it'd be difficult to get, anyone to read this, because 1, it was kind of long, and 2, I mean, like it's a screenplay. It's meant to be, seen really, to be honest, but like no one's going to give me, $100 million to make this. So then I wrote another one, and for some reason I was like, instead of being like more realistic, I was like, oh, we'll just do whatever, write whatever you want. And that's when I wrote the Saturn Effect. And that was more like, okay, well, you need like a couple $100 million for that one. So you're going to have to build it from the ground up, basically. And so, and that's so I
So
was like,
you double down. You were
we
like,
doubled
oh, well,
down.
the first screenplay that was a little too much, probably too
Yeah.
ambitious to get this sold.
Yeah.
Let me just make one that's even crazier
Yes. But
in terms of the
luckily,
production required. Yeah.
yes. But luckily, something like comics, like it's the production value in comparison to like a big box office movie is not even comparable. So I was like, okay, if I want people to read this, I need to find a way to make it, something visual and something, because I also thought it'd be an easier way for people to consume it, right? And more people, if it's make it visual, I mean, more people watch TV than read books. So and so that's what I did, was like make a comic, and we made the first 3 issues. I contacted Jacopo over Reddit, and we started making books, and then I got connected to Francesco through him, and then we've gone from there.
Awesome. And what was that process like, scouting him out on Reddit? Had you already been in contact about other things, or were you looking for an artist who would fit a specific image you had in your head as you were writing Saturn Effect?
I was looking for, yes, I was looking for that, but I was also looking to make it something that like I could make. Like it was really important for me to be able to actually make it. And so, being, fresh out of college and, doing this at the beginning of a pandemic, it was a little like the finances were something that I wanted to make sure. So like that was something like looking and I looked for something specific and so in a specific budget to make sure that like, and then some of that I thought could like hit these deadlines so that we can like make sure that this thing got out. So that was what that process was sort of like. And it was like just corresponding, like sending a script out, seeing if anyone even liked the script. I didn't want somebody that didn't care about it at all. I'd rather somebody want to write it or want to draw it. So,
Yeah. Somebody who kind of understood your vision and
yeah,
like vibed with it and could actually
yeah,
get behind it and be excited
yeah,
to draw. Well,
exactly.
it's a really cool story. And so, I mean, from what I gather of what you're saying now, you wrote even the first the first three issues that are available online.
Yes.
Even at the beginning of that, started under these current crazy pandemic coronavirus conditions. So what was like the timeline for you writing it, starting it, and kind of spinning it out? Because we're still not a year into the new life that we're all living.
That's true. It's
So
pretty
you
crazy.
did a lot. Yeah, you did a lot in 8 months. I'd be interested to hear about the progression of the project under the confines of the current global pandemic situation.
For sure. So I'm pretty manic when I write. So I know a lot of people talk about, writing every day. I'm more of like write, think a lot and then write like for a while and then write it all out. So when I first wrote the Saturn Effect, I got through quite a few issues of Ajax that we still have on backlog before we still make them, still to be made. And so it started with that, and I started that back in maybe November of last year. So it was little did we know coronavirus was creeping around, but like it was before all this happened, and it was sort of like a slow process of this. So the first issue took a little while, and then it dropped after coronavirus had started somewhere in March. So it was like a little bit afterwards, and then I started writing. In the beginning of that's when I started writing the Saturn Effect Alpha, sort of charged by just like how everyone was, pretty creatively charged at the beginning of the pandemic, same here. So that's when that started. And that's when I started I wanted to write it at first as a one shot. And after I'd written it and after I'd like talking to Francesco and like we had started posting some little clips of it beforehand, I was like, okay, maybe this is a little bit, maybe we should put a little bit more into this. And so we've crafted the 8-part series and now we're on the move towards the finish line. So the sort of refrain in the TSE Ajax, if anyone has read it, is finish the mission. And so that's exactly what we're going to be doing right now, is finishing the mission.
Nice. So yeah, for anybody who is listening who isn't familiar, Ajax is the currently 3 issues that are up online, right?
Yes.
And then Saturn Effect Alpha is the series that you just kickstarted.
Yes, exactly.
You're going to put out that first issue soon, and that will be the first of a 8-part series.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. And how much more do you have to put out for the Ajax part of the story that's online?
It's looking about 2 more issues. There's looking about 2 more issues that we'll put out. There's some more, and we'll see how much ends up being tossed into other storylines later on. But two is looking like is probably where we'll get to.
Awesome.
It's a big universe. It's a big universe. It's a big story, and I don't want to say too much, but the Saturn Effect is also just the beginning. So
I get that. Yeah, I get the sense, and I was able to enjoy both. You sent me an early PDF of the comic that's to be released, and I read the web comics, and you can see the intermingling of the storylines in an interesting way. So I definitely get the sense that it's gonna slowly build out to something much larger. And
Yes.
even already I could, there's a couple of themes that I want to explore with you. But before we get into that, and before we get into talking about how you intend on growing the project, I'd love to ask if I'm now under the impression that maybe this started off as a screenplay.
Yes.
The concepts
Yes.
for and
Yes.
the, and the
yes, for the Saturn Effect Ajax, yes.
So how did you
how
did you transition that from screenplay to comic script?
Well,
And is there
I
much
think,
cut out? You know, what's that process look like?
so I think the process is it's an important one, because I personally like to get the whole story out before I start to break it into panels necessarily. I can have panels in my mind and sort of write it in a way in the screenplay format that is, makes it easy to break down into a typical comics format script. But I just find it's easier to read for anyone that you're trying to like pitch a script to. For me personally, and that's not like a professional in sort of like an indie space. If I'm looking for artists and I want them to enjoy the script, I want them to read it and like really understand what I'm trying to get at, from like a reader perspective, what I want the reader to understand, and for them to be like, okay, I get behind this. I want to be part of this project. So I do a lot of writing in screenplay and then sending and using that to like get people to understand like what the story is and what we'll be making together. And then I'll do detailed panel breakdowns where I'll like include like references, and we'll break it down. This is panel 1 with 5 plus X panels, whatever, how many panels there are. And then we'll put references. I have a huge reference file with like all the comic pages that I love. And whenever I read something new, I save pages. We throw it in that reference file. And when I'm writing something and I'm breaking it down into those panels, we'll go back, we'll go through it also. And this is also a good way to edit as well. So it goes through, I go through multiple filters of myself. I try to be my own hardest critic, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but I try to put a lot of different filters and way to filter through it. And so this is another way to, on top of other drafting, is a way to make, significant, changes for the better, while also, making, something pretty vital for getting your vision across to the artist. So that's generally how I do it. I usually write with screenplay, but with keeping in mind that this will be a comic script. Like if you write things too much for cinema, it won't always work, and it can be difficult if the artist isn't, super, cinematic in how they draw or how they visualize things in their own director's mind. So, yeah.
Right. So are there notes you provide them on the theme
Yes.
to get their buy-in? It's like
Yes.
undercurrent themes, and like this
Yeah.
is where the story's going. So, understand that this nuance is important, even though it doesn't seem important maybe now to somebody who's simply reading it, stuff like
Yes,
that.
100%.
And what kind of visual references do you provide? Like, yeah.
Mostly comic references. When I first started about a year ago, I'd use a lot of just like whatever I found on Google. But now that I've like tried to really get into, because I would say the problem with this method is, as I said, you can keep things being too cinematic, and you want to make sure that you're making something for comic books, not for cinema, because you're not writing a movie, you're writing a comic book. So I try to, keep myself really engrossed in comics. And so I have, as I said, I have a huge reference file with just like all the art pages that I like. And it's almost always what I use is just like comics that are coming out right now, or great comics that I love. So like anything coming out from Marvel, anything coming out from DC, anything coming out from Image that I've gone through. And I'm like, okay, I can sort of see this in one of the stories that I've already written that would be a good reference, or for stories that I'm going to write, or if I'm just like, wow, this is super cool, and maybe I'll need this in the future, it goes in there. And so that's how the references I provide are generally from that, because I feel like if we look at things that are being made professionally and we use that as reference, then we will be closer to being professional. And so that's always the goal, is because we're trying to make the best things that we can. And it's always trying to do better than the last time. That's sort of the mantra that I have with the team is, we're always trying to do better than last time.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good mantra to have. And I should jot that down. I've kind of promised myself now, I think today's the 16th episode. I always say if
Mhm.
I'm counting correctly, because one time I counted incorrectly. But yeah, when I'm chatting with each of my guests, inevitably every other episode, or maybe even every episode, some sort of mantra will reveal itself.
Mhm.
So I need to start jotting them down, and
Definitely.
who's what mantras have creators shared over the course of doing the podcast with me, and create a little reference for
That'd be
people,
great. I'd love to see that.
including myself. Yeah.
Definitely. I'd love to see a book of that when you're finished after like 100 episodes.
Yeah. Right. Once I go a little bit deeper in.
Yeah.
Awesome. So did you have to leave anything out of did anything change from the screenplay to the comic? Because I know that the comic, in terms of the arc of a book, the arc of a series, may differ from movies.
Mhm.
So I wonder if you had to really change the narrative arc at all, or cut some things out and leave them out because they didn't fit into the kind of flow of storytelling via comic books.
So I wouldn't say that we cut anything out, but we see a lot of things from different perspectives than how I wrote them initially.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
so yeah, so a lot of things we would have seen from one person's perspective that now we'll be seeing from another character's perspective. So we're not really going to be missing anything. Is maybe, yeah, you won't be missing anything. Nothing's really is missing. It's just it's changed a little bit of how, perspective. And I think perspective is something that's a theme that we try to get across too, in the comic, and how perspective can change a lot.
You mean perspective of same or similar events?
Yes.
From multiple perspectives can
yes
be interpreted totally differently, kind of
yes
theme.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a noble theme, I think, and one that we could all benefit from, consuming in the media that we watch and read.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So were you always a comic book reader, or did you dive more deeply into comics once you made the realization that writing for comics may be an easier route to getting your stories to an audience over trying to get them made into films? So did you have a really robust comic library before you made that realization, or is it something that you're developing now that you made that decision?
So it is something that I've gotten into way deeper as I've gotten into writing comics, because comics, as like a child of like the mid 90s, comic books had already become like media. We're already pop culture, almost, or maybe not as pop culture as now. It would be impossible to be as pop now as it was then, or then as it is now. But it was still huge. We had cartoons. We had your Spider-Man cartoon, X-Men, you had Static Shock. You had, the list goes on, Justice League. There's just so much. And so I was always like had superheroes around, right? But I didn't always have comic books. So comic books is, now that I'm an adult and it's something that I want to get into, it's something that I collect a lot more now. And I have like a large, and growing indie collection now too, which is super cool. But when I was younger, I would say I would consume way more manga, because that was way more accessible online for someone that's, poor teenager. It's more like I want to get entertainment, but I know I'm only going to read it for, 2 minutes. So I'm not going to spend too much money. I'm not just going to spend the money I could spend on, a League of Legends skins or something. So I'm just going to read the free manga. And so that's generally where, when I was, in my more formative years, where I'd get a lot of, my story sort of influence in that sort of sequential art format. And it wasn't until, and I started to read more comics as I've gotten older and older, but now it's like really into it. In the past year, I've gotten into where I read a lot of stuff now, trying to go back to the stuff that I'd missed and catching up and things like that. and like asking, you know, the artists that I work with, like, what are your favorite comics? And that's something when I first start to work with people, that's something that I ask them. I always want to know like what your favorite comics are, what your favorite movies are, like what genres you like, and like things like that. So we can like figure out like the best way to work together and the best things to work together on.
So can I spin that question right back
Yeah,
out
100%.
at you?
Yeah.
What you know, what comics, what manga were you reading back in the day when you couldn't really put money down for buying into $4 an issue comics?
Okay.
And then, you know,
$4 versus free. That's 400. That's like infinite percent. So
right. Yeah. So, and then, you know, back then, what were you reading? What kind of media were you consuming? What movies did you watch then? And now, what are you inspired by?
Okay, so I would say back then I was reading like, you know, the typical shonen, like, you know, Naruto, Bleach type things like that. And then now you know, I read a bunch of the new stuff. I mean, I read like Venom is probably my favorite thing that's going on. The Kate's run is with the King in Black. I feel like that's super sick if we're talking about current running stuff. But you know, I've, you know, the stuff that I really love, you know, Mouse, I feel like is obviously super beautiful. And then favorite superhero comic would probably be All-Star Superman, which is something Francesco recommended to me that I had missed because I was a loser, not spending $4 on comics and, and reading manga online, and you know, wanting to, you know, Naruto run through the hallways with my forehead band on. But yeah, and then that's something that I've, you know, I even have the book, you know, right up here that, you know, and it's, so as I've grown older, I've like shifted to, you know, some of the classic things that people consider as classics. And if we're thinking about movies, when I was younger, I mean, it was just like always any Marvel movies, like Iron Man, like the first Avengers. That was like my thing. I was like, what movies? Marvel movies are movies. There are no other movies. And then when I got to college, it was like, okay, Pulp Fiction, that is the only other movie than Marvel movies. And then and I had a huge poster of Pulp Fiction on my wall, like massive. It was like the only thing I had in my room that I decorated was this massive Pulp Fiction picture. And then my friend had like some sort of Marky Mark picture on his wall, which was, you know, funny. And then I think somebody gave us like a Weekenders poster, if you remember that movie, with like Vanessa Hudgens and other people that we had on the wall. And that
you had
that was
an ensemble cast on your
yes,
posters.
exactly. But yeah, but now I would say my like top movies would be like, well, the movie that I like revere and just like would, you know, is like my Bible is Chinatown, which is just like amazing, beautiful, like the best written movie ever. Like nobody can tell me differently.
Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, it's just like amazing, and just like Roman Polanski directing. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, amazing movie. That's probably like, you know, up there for me, and you know, Interstellar also. So, you know, if you wanted an idea of what the Saturn Effect is, imagine Chinatown plus Interstellar. That's what I want it to be, and so that's how I'm going to market it as.
Nice. And are there any other sci-fi inspirations that you gleaned from, or things you grew up, things you watched when you were growing up?
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, other stuff that I gleaned from, you know, Space Odyssey. There's stuff that I tried to like avoid because I didn't particularly like the movie, not to have any hot takes, but movies like Ad Astra. I would almost say that the Saturn Effect is like a direct response to how much I hated Ad Astra. And I was like, I could write a better movie than this. And so
you want to say, or you are saying?
I am saying it. I'm definitively saying it right now. But don't at me. But yeah, so and then there's, you know, some other classics like Alien, you know, beautiful movie. Other comic influences would be something like Tokyo Ghost, Black Science. You know, I'm a big Rick Remender fanboy too. And yeah, so those would probably be some of the bigger ones, you know. And then the obvious like Blade Runner, who's, you know, that movie's obviously influenced everyone since like whatever, the 80s. And stuff like that. So I've tried to, in the past few years, I've tried to, you know, go back to the stuff that people find as classic. I was an English major, so that was sort of something that I did with books too. I wanted to know, like being a writer, I wanted to know what the people thought were the best. Like, what's the canon? Like, I should read about it, and then have people, like, you know, quote unquote smart people teach me about it. Not to say that my professors weren't really smart. A lot of them were. But so, you know, and then after college, like, well, what else can I could take a look at? Not to say I wrote every classic, but just to look at classics in other mediums. And so, you know, went back into film and sort of, you know, tried to take a crack at, I'm sure everyone does this, right? It's like, oh, we should watch some classics. So I've had a couple phases of those, and eventually, you know, it stacks up and you see a lot of them.
Yeah. I have went through those phases myself, and usually I sputter out before I make it through like my whole list.
Yeah.
But the list is always there to revisit
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
And I think it's good to have those points of reference, especially if like you're hanging out with your friends or
Definitely.
you meet people and the
Definitely.
same movie keeps coming up over and over
Yeah.
again. It would
Yeah.
probably make sense to
Yeah.
check
It's
it
like,
out.
just
So that
watch The Godfather. Just like get it over with. Just like, it's like a shot, you know, just
I
like,
know. And we're in lockdown anyway. You don't
yeah,
really
might
have
as
an
well. Just
excuse.
like,
You don't
just
have an excuse at this point.
exactly. Just get your Godfather immunization ready, you know, you'll be perfectly ready for when it ever comes up in conversation. And never again will somebody say, have you seen The Godfather? And you'd be like, no, and embarrassed. You'll have seen it.
So I have to admit, I have not seen The Godfather myself.
See this moment right now.
I
Take your shots, boys.
after I ridiculed fake ridiculed people for not having
No,
seen
it's
it
totally
yet.
fine. It's just it's just one of those things. It's one of those things. It's a good movie though. I mean, one
Yeah,
of those things where it's like, is it the best movie of all time? Probably not, but it's definitely something to watch. And that's how it
yeah.
is with all these classics. Are they the best things? Are they the best things ever? Are they the best things that we've ever seen? I mean, no, it's probably just what a bunch of, you know, probably Caucasian people decided were the best things ever. But like, you know, that doesn't mean they have no merit at all. There's definitely something to learn from and try and, like, you know, use to improve yourself and your craft. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's always filtered through the lens and the mouth of whoever has the microphone, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
I similarly feel that a lot of what is recommended as the best ever is not the example I would go to here is when I was growing up, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out, and I was similarly like pretty strapped for cash and did not lay down dollars easy to get into a theater. And I went and saw that movie twice.
Wow.
And that
Dedication.
year, I don't know what it was, like 2002 or 3, something around there, maybe a little bit earlier. What's that movie with Tom Hanks and the volleyball? Castaway came out, and it was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was nominated for Best Picture, and Castaway ended up winning. I would, you know, looking back at it now, and I certainly felt this way then, was that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was a way better, way more prolific, a movie that had a lot longer shelf life than Castaway.
Okay.
And I think, and I wonder, I'll take your opinion on this too. I think that holds true this many, you know, coming up 15, 20 years, whatever it is after. I was bitter that Castaway beat Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon out.
You know, I don't think I could give a proper, you know, like appraisal on the situation, because, you know, Castaway is a great movie, but I had watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon maybe a little too young, but like it definitely was like, you know, I was definitely into Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, if you know what I'm saying. So I don't think I'm gonna have to plead the fifth on this one. But I don't think you're wrong, dude. I mean, we all have different opinions. It doesn't mean one is better than the other, you know. And I think there's an argument to be made. I mean, like, how good is Castaway really? I mean,
yeah, I don't think
don't
all
at
that
me.
great. Yeah, but you know, the everything is subjective to some degree, even when it comes to determining what are the classics and what is the best film of all time. There's no such thing.
Yes, definitely.
So in Saturn Effect, going back to that, I wonder if you watched any military Vietnam movies or anything like that, because the themes that pertain to the militarism are the first that stood out to me. And
Reading the
Yeah,
reading.
reading, both
Mhm,
the web series and the print version as well.
mhm,
Uh, yeah, I wonder if you have any firsthand experience with
mhm,
the military or family
mhm,
members who are service members,
mhm,
and also what inspired you
mhm,
to address those themes
mhm.
so directly.
Definitely. So I don't want to make it seem that the Saturn Effect is like trying to be the most like accurate military like, because I personally haven't served, and obviously respect to anyone that has, and I do have family members that have served in the past, and so my grandfather was a Marine and he had died last year before I'd written it, so I was sort of like you know a you know tribute to him in a sort of way to make it the Space Marines and sort of have a go on an adventure that way. But militarism and it's sort of it was something that I wanted to take a look at because of just the nature of war, and how the idea is like there is no real person that's no side is better, for the most part is like, I don't want to make too much of a blanket statement there, but for the most part no one's too just over the other one. And so that was something that I wanted to really, and I thought that was like, and when we're talking about thinking about perspectives and the idea of like how the everyone sees things differently, different groups see different things differently, and that doesn't make one greater than the other. I thought that war was like a good clear way to sort of bring those themes, and sort of work with those themes. So I wouldn't say there was any specific movies that I was like, okay, this is the one where I'm like, all right, let's use this for, you know, inspiration for the Saturn Effect. I mean, I don't know if you'd really count this as like a war movie, but like something like Doctor Strangelove though had like some a lot of influence too on that sort of like looking about war and like violence and like weapons and then maybe we'll see some more influence from some things like that in the future and things to come, and so yeah. Yeah, and then
Nice.
there's other stuff that we like. If we're thinking more about like on a war perspective, I there's a lot of like sci-fi war things that I looked at a lot too, like the Foundations. I would sort of consider as like with have like some war, like violent militarism sort of themes that I drew a lot from for this as well, and
Yeah.
like other sci-fi books.
I,
I
I,
took a sci-fi class in college, so we went through like all of this kind of stuff.
yeah, nice. I like that you don't just jump into, hey, this is us going to battle, but you have kind of you show the formative time spent in camp and,
Yeah.
you know, from the point where they're drafted and these individuals join the military through boot camp, and then to they're excelling in boot camp, they've overcome some of the mental hurdles necessary to survive through boot camp, and now they're ready to go to war.
Yes.
And yeah, I appreciated that you set the stage that way because it helps to um, give more depth to the characters,
Mhm.
that they weren't born heroes, they weren't born jumping out the womb with a machine gun.
Yeah.
They had to be
Yeah.
trained to get that point, and they had a more vulnerable point in their lives, that they
Yes.
had really intimate relationships. And I suppose, and maybe you could build off of this, that
Mhm.
you're going to use that difference, the person before being drafted,
Mhm.
and then the person after they're drafted and have military experience, to draw some contrast in
Yes.
what that experience does in shaping a person's character. So obviously don't want you to spoil your own project, but I wonder if you could speak to that point at all.
I would say yes. And I think you may be onto something, and I don't want to spoil anything, and I'll just say yes to that.
Okay, yeah, fair
And
enough.
yes, because it's when you're and it's not just in when it comes to military conflict, it's anything. When we're talking about human experience, let me take a second. When we're talking about human experience, we have to all remember that the shared thing that we have is like this notion, this reality of death. And I think when it comes to different people, we all sort of grapple with it differently, but we all have this maybe moment or awakening. Maybe it happens when you're in your 50s with your midlife crisis, or maybe it happens after you have like a child, if you're, a parent or something like that. But there's this moment where you're sort of like confronted with mortality, and you realize more of the nature of life than you'd had previously, I would say. And that I think has a major impact in how we all go about life after something like that, some sort of, maybe it's awakening, maybe it's a panic attack. I don't know whatever it is for a certain person, but once you're sort of confronted with this reality, maybe it's an event when it comes to, or maybe it's training when it comes to the Saturn Effect and Ajax and Helena and Kip and Leaf and all the other characters that we see, sort of grow up and have to be shipped away to conflict. Or it can be, maybe because it's a family member dying, or maybe it's your own close experience with something, but you're being confronted with mortality. And I think that once you have that, your decisions are different from when before that happens, or at least you're considering a lot more things. Your decision-making process at least has been altered permanently, I'd say. Not in like a scary way, but in like this is life, and now you understand life better, and so you're going to make life decisions differently.
Interesting. So I wonder, as a young man yourself, if that theme is informed by and from a personal experience that you felt like you yourself have made that transition at some point, and if so, if you want to talk about that at all.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like, super like I've like found some enlightenment, but I do think that there have been moments in life where I've like, sort of maybe not have come to a greater understanding of just like, what we're all experiencing as people. And I've definitely felt like it's had an effect on the decisions that I've made. And so that's definitely, I don't want to get too deep into it, not because it's anything like bad or anything, but it's like, I don't think necessarily, I don't think your age matters, because it could happen. You can be a child and it could happen to you. I mean, there's plenty of super self-aware, really smart children. And this is also not something about how smart you are either. It's just like life, and like how, when you decide to start to think about these things, or whenever life decides to make you start thinking about these things.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one of them being, yes, my grandfather dying was like something that, being one of the first people that I know closely to have, passed away. But I wouldn't say that's necessarily the only thing. I mean, because there's plenty of things that like, and it's not something that you're going to be able to hold on to forever. I think eventually you get swept back into, the daily, day to day, work 9 to 5, and eventually, it takes a second for you to like be woken back up to, oh, this is what we're all going through. This is where we're living. And this is how we're all rocking out, basically. So I wouldn't say it was any one event necessarily, but maybe a collection of a few. But that doesn't mean you need these are the necessary ones to have some idea of this sort of concept.
Yeah. No, I fully appreciate and agree that those experiences are very personal. And the only reason I pointed out you being a young man and potentially having had one such experience is to draw a contrast from, as you describe, a 50-year-old having a midlife crisis is one example. So I wonder if you had an example from the opposite end of the spectrum, or at least a little bit earlier in life. So that's interesting. And
I mean, if we're talking, anxiety and panic attacks, I've had a couple. I've had a couple, but I mean, hey, it's 2020. I'm sure we've all had at least one by now. Come on. I mean, we've all seen The Godfather, right?
I haven't seen The Godfather, but I've definitely had a panic attack, especially considering the world in which we live in.
Yeah.
That's another reason why I wanted to highlight that point, is because probably any person, I don't want to say any sane person, I don't want to shame anybody who hasn't had an existential panic attack in the last year, but I think it's probably pretty normal. And talking about those things is, I think, pretty cool in that we can relate to each other in a more vulnerable way. So thank you for sharing that, and also 100%. For writing about it and highlighting it in your comic.
So what we try to do, man. We just try to hopefully write some good stuff that, like, when you try and think about it, it's like, oh, that was pretty good. That's like the most, that's what I hope for, you know. I don't want to, I always try to set reasonable expectations, and, you know, you never, like, you always want to write the best you can, and you always want to, like, write something amazing. But, like, at the end of the day, if people just enjoy what I write, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, but going back before we, go back to just the story and enjoying the story for the story, what are some of the other deeper themes maybe that you would want to highlight for people who would be interested in picking up the comic and reading it? You know,
for sure.
We've touched on the existentialism and the themes of militarism and kind of coming of age maybe and growing up within a certain structure and system. Are there others that you pointed out to your artists as you were developing the comic?
Yes. So when looking at something like TAC Alpha, it definitely has themes of, police violence and things like that, which I think, when I wrote it, I felt like it shouldn't be something that we all should be polarized about. Obviously, I mean, maybe now it's maybe something a little bit more like touchy, but at the time it was something, and I still believe like it should be something that we all like, are against. These, this is police. People shouldn't just be dying for no reason. There should always be, and there should be recourse for these things, yada yada, and things like that. But I would definitely say, like, violence. Differences between groups, specifically in Alpha. I also want to like highlight the differences between groups, but not necessarily make it racial, because when the thing that I wanted to do with race, I myself am I'm a Black American. My family's from the Caribbean. I'm a pretty light skinned, but I always felt that especially in like sci-fi, a lack of, maybe different colored people sort of at the helm. So when it came to race, I wanted to sort of take, I didn't want that to be like the thing that people were hoping for from those characters. I just wanted to put those characters up, and I wanted those characters to be the ones that we follow. And then I wanted to put those sort of like tensions that you generally find from racial things and onto something else, so that we can focus more on like, okay, this is just, so that wasn't the focus for those, but those themes still appear in a different sort of manner.
So more specifically, I would guess that the races are maybe different species, including aliens and hybrid androids and things like that, instead of having it being racial divide along the lines that we would think of in contemporary times.
Yes. And so for the Saturn Effect, we have, and we see this in the Saturn Effect Alpha, we have two post-human races, the pure and the modified, and they have a lot of tension between the two of them, due to, one looking down on the other for being, maybe genetically altered in a sense, or thinking that their genetic alterations are different from the ones that they have. And so that's where we put some of those like more racial tension, those more familiar racial tensions, and we sort of like shift those away from the fact that, here we have characters that like, that don't look like the typical, space person, and and we can follow them, and we can like enjoy a great story, and like it not be about them being that, but like they are that. It's just because like it's something like it's important to have. I think it's important to have representation, but I don't like I don't want representation to be like absolutely forced, you know? Like not everything is
Yeah.
about somebody's race, you know? You can
Yeah.
represent a race and it not be like about their race, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, and I very much appreciate that and agree. And it's a topic that's like really a previous guest who I guess is on whatever episodes before this. um, we got into some more politically charged
Mm-hmm.
areas of creativity and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to highlight contemporary themes and issues that are
Mm-hmm.
really just polarizing everybody and use our creativity to
Mm-hmm.
find a path forward. And I,
Mm-hmm.
I think by using metaphor and making it, maybe it's obvious, but it's not, because you're being a little bit indirect by it, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
become the emphasis and the focus
Yeah.
of the story. Not that some stories shouldn't be the focus of, but if that's, if you want to have multiple layers and that be one layer of many,
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate the way that you approach it. And I hope that sort of creativity in the end allows people to come back together and find some humanity where, we could disagree, but also understand where each other are coming from, at least
That's
on
the
the,
goal.
when we're not at the total polar opposites,
Yeah,
that we're somewhere in
absolutely.
the middle and can come back and start seeing eye to eye and maybe
Absolutely.
realizing that some of the differences that we put so much weight into are actually pretty superficial,
Pretty superficial. Yeah.
right?
Yes,
I
definitely.
just unloaded a mouthful on you.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate it because I think it's 100% true. And it's also something that I just in general, how I feel like I'd like to get past, like, it's a, kind of a buzzword now, but like get past the tribalization of, that we're all in these two separate camps basically. And it's kind of hard for us to get out of it and sort of realize that, you know, and we're the two camps, we kind of all want the same thing. The people want the same thing. And, and that's, I mean, maybe we're divided culturally but I think and maybe that's, being played up by, things like the media and whatever to make it like even more, ferocious and like than it needs to be and like more, contentious. But like, and at the end of the day, we all just want the same things, right? We all want to have like, we all want to like love something. We all want to, whatever that is, thing that is. And then we
Love
all want to
something,
like
be loved,
be
be
loved,
happy,
be
essentially, and
happy, make some
secure.
money, hopefully, or at least be, have the opportunity to make money and, not starve. And that's basically, otherwise people are pretty happy and we'll be, we all want, if you, at the end of the day, we all want those things. So, it'd be nice to, and hopefully through something like, that I've written or, other people have written or just like creativity in general, we can sort of get to a place where we can sort of understand these different sides and not be at each other's throats for feeling or thinking differently. When, when it comes to almost anything, like there's probably about 50% of people that think the exact opposite of you. So you probably just shouldn't get too upset about that.
But on a lot of issues too, I would point out that maybe 50% of the people in the center agree with you and 25% on either poll disagree, but they're kind of
Yeah.
polling and dictating a lot
Yeah.
of the conversation and the appearance that we can't all just get along.
Definitely.
But I hope that inevitably we could. And I think it's cool, and it adds layers of thought, I'm sure, for you as a creator to consider themes of race or at least tribes and different types of people coming together. And
Yeah.
is that the theme that inspires you most to look at the story from multiple perspectives? Or
Well, I think the thing that probably inspires me most, and this is, it's more of the stuff that I've written recently, and hopefully we'll get to see some of that. And that's not necessarily part of the Saturn Effect. We have a couple of other projects in the works, and And I'd say for those, the thing that motivates me the most is raging against the machine, basically, like raging against the system. But so yeah, I would say that's probably what motivates me the most, and just like, and but I mean, I think those two things are connected, honestly. Like I think this is something that this idea of the system, not to be like, that guy, but like whatever your idea of the
Oh, you're
system
that guy.
is like sort of, divides us, right? And so,
Yeah.
the things that like keep people, to keep the wealthy, and to keep the people that, don't have anything, continuously having nothing, is the system, and whatever that may be, is something that, we should all be sort of, raging against, for equality for everyone, and about, and sort of like, doing things for the people. The people is probably what I'd say most motivating thing for me.
Are there any specific, when we talk about systems and
Mm,
the machine and stuff, it's such a somewhat defined but still very
yeah.
ambiguous
Yes.
structure that
Mm,
we talk about, people
yeah.
discuss. But I also realize whenever I talk in those terms that
Yeah.
different individuals might have a nuanced understanding,
Mm,
and that
mm,
that word may have a different definition within their own mind.
mm,
To one person, it might mean the corporate media. To one
mm,
person, it might mean the government,
mm,
the federal government.
mm,
To another person, it might mean the financial institution.
mm,
So I wonder for you if you have something more specific,
mm,
and if you don't,
mm.
it's okay. Or if
I
in
definitely do.
you definitely do.
I definitely do. I would say all three of those things are pretty relatively connected in this idea of like, well, the system and the things that are wrong with the country. If we're talking about America, right? And looking back at like the beginning of coronavirus, and like how much money was given out to big business, and how little money was given out to the people, and how billionaires have gotten richer, and how the people and poor people continue to get poor. And when we look at the recovery that's going on, it's very obviously a K-shaped. I don't want to be too political about this, but like
Yeah,
it's
it's hard
super
to
obvious
avoid these
that
days for
these
sure.
things, that the things that are going on in America, and the things that are going on around, like on generally as a whole, is just more geared to the people at the top, and the people at the bottom, the people in charge, the people that like control the media, the people that control our laws. They don't care about you, and they don't care about me. They don't care about anyone that makes less than $400,000 a year. So it's like, when I talk about the system, when I'm thinking about the system in that sort of sense, in a more real world sense, that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, just like how things could be more fair, but that's okay, because I think there's things don't stay the same forever, and I think we've seen that before. And maybe we try and go back to back to brunch now, and but that doesn't change the things that go on in people's lives, and doesn't change the things like the obvious like mental health crises, and looming eviction crises, and other horrible, horrendous things that are happening to like a lot of the country, that some of the another half of the country doesn't even get to see. And so when I'm talking about the system, I'm talking about the things that keep people down, that keep people sick, and keep people in debt, and keep people from being able to do the things that they want to do, and live the little, like the finite life that we really have, and like being able to pursue those things that we all want, right? And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the system. And yeah, that's about as much as I'll go into. I don't want to become like some sort of populist, like like
It's really like, I
you
mean,
know
talking about creativity, and if you have something, you're writing a story, and it's most people I find, including myself, we want to
mhm,
explore and better understand the circumstances in which we live by
mhm,
writing
mhm,
about it, whether directly or indirectly. And so, yeah, it certainly makes sense that the current situation, politically, socially, culturally, would all inform in some way, or at least in part, the stories that you're writing. So no need to
Definitely.
apologize. Yeah. I like I said, I struggle to talk about some topics because sometimes the words kind of escape me. And there's just so much going on at once that maybe I don't have a really well-formed opinion on some of the issues yet, right? So that's another part. I feel like everybody is expected to suddenly be an expert when usually we leave decision making up to our leaders.
Yeah.
And we assume and hope that they are well informed enough
Yeah.
that we don't have to be as well
Yeah.
informed, and we could
That's just not the case.
absolve and give some of the decision making up and not worry about it. But now, because of such a lack of leadership, in my opinion, I think we all expect ourselves to be leadership to fill that vacuum, and it's created a really confusing state of affairs, I think, for all of us, as things are, socially, politically, culturally evolving so quickly. So yeah, thank you for sharing that
Of
insight
course.
into your world and the universe that you're developing. So why, when you were creating and writing the story, and this might go back to when you were writing the screenplay, how did you determine the setting and some of the boundaries and confines in which you wrote and staged this story? Why is it Mars? Am I right? That there's
We have we have some Mars, we have some Saturn / Titan, and then we have some Earth scenes, depending on which book you're looking at. So we're in a couple different places in the solar system. But to answer the question, I wanted, so as I said, the Saturn Effect was just the beginning. So I wanted to make sure that we're pretty confined in, this solar system. I also wanted to, when we're thinking about like what were the parameters for like where in time, I wanted it to, feel like the future, but it's not like Star Wars future. It's not like that. It's not like in a distant galaxy far, far away. It's like, like this is, could be somewhere that we're going potentially, things that humanity is hopefully going to be working on, like terraforming Mars, terraforming some sort of, outer planet moon or a moon closer, looking for life other places and other things like that. So when I was thinking about where to put these stories, I wanted to, build a universe that had that sort of felt familiar because of like the things that then the concepts that we're sort of seeing them come to fruition, like an idea like terraforming Mars or an idea like terraforming Titan. And so that's how I sort of like put up the parameters for this story, and where I wanted to set it, and then like to explore those different areas. It's like, here we have Ajax and he's from Earth, so this is how we can explore the Earth parts of this, and then we have TC Alpha, which takes place on the Saturn, the Titan mega station colonies, and so then it's like how we explore that area too, and then we'll we have flashbacks to Mars and how the Martian conflict and the Martian wars and things like that, and those different events that are sort of backdrops to the story that we have, and so that's what I sort of look to. And to like build out those areas that I had built and parameters around for this universe and this story.
Nice. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. And it just occurred to me as you were saying that description when I was reading your book, and this is kind of going back to the conversation that we almost pretty much just concluded, but I was struck by the idea that despite our ability to travel to these other planets, all of our social issues have manifested themselves in just different ways. And is there a way to escape them? So I'm sorry to go back around in a circle to the part of the conversation we just concluded, but to ask you kind of a deep question, and maybe it's something that you're going to be exploring in future issues, is do you think that do you personally, in the world, and do you, within the confines of your story, think that there are ways to overcome some of the tribalism and stuff that we see today and that you explore in your comic?
I think when it comes to the real world, hopefully. When it comes to, and I guess that's all I could really say about that one. But when it comes to the Saturn Effect, yes, and be on the lookout for some interesting conversations, and that's all I'll say about that one. I don't want to spoil too much, but
so I'll
yeah.
put some words into your mouth, and you could give like a nod or
Yeah.
nod
Okay.
in either direction.
Okay.
But these are some of the ideas that you're going to be exploring.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Definitely. Absolutely.
Nice.
And like, can humanity escape it? And what does something have to happen to humanity for us to reconsider and make decisions differently? Sort of bring us back to that idea from before about, of mortality bringing us different clarity and different thought processes when it comes to certain situations and certain just everything.
Right. So has I'm thinking about that statement through the lens of two things. One, in all, I won't say all, but in many space invasion movies, countries who previously had great difference and were on the brink of nuclear war are able to cooperate and collaborate against the
Are you asking me if there's aliens in the Saturn Effect?
No. That existential threat posed to humanity as a whole allows us to come together as a human tribe, so to speak, right? And in that sense, that's kind of our goal, is to not our goal, but what we're talking about is, can humanity come together to overcome these differences? But for me, coronavirus is kind of that alien ship, and our ability to coalesce around one approach and a human, let's have our species survive and prosper and come together and kill it, nation states aside and national affiliations aside.
Didn't go so well.
It didn't go too well. So to parlay that into a question, I wonder if the script for you has changed at all, and the idea that you started in and you were writing in November and starting to bring into existence as a story to share with others right around when the pandemic hit. I wonder if your story changed at all because of the impact of the pandemic.
So when the pandemic was hitting its apex, well, maybe not its apex now, but its apex at the time, when I was writing, or when we were making TSC Ajax issue 2, and so you can probably see a little bit of the influence in that, and sort of the things that are going around them. And as I've said, I've been continuing to write Alpha as time goes on, because I had written it as a one shot, and now we're, it's an 8-part series, and we have I'd say we have 3.5 to fully script out. All of it's, just like fully script out. We all have it outlined and stuff. So when it comes to that storyline, that's growing as and changing as we always have the same endpoint, but maybe the different themes that come out and what the dialogue has definitely changed, and definitely building on some things that we are going on now that maybe we have different opinions on, or having more evolved opinions on, or than we did before when we first had sort of tackled these different topics. But then there's also the fact that we'll be tackling a lot of the stuff on from a different perspective, as I said, than I initially wrote it. And so that's another reason why there's definitely some changes, and that have been influenced by what's going on now.
Interesting. Yeah. And then what is your release schedule for the first issue, and then your plans for the subsequent 7?
Okay. So Alpha 1 should be by February. Hopefully everyone that's Kickstarted should have it. And that is also when we'll be kickstarting TSC Alpha 2. And so be on the lookout for that link, anyone listening, to follow that page, so we can hopefully get off to a great start. We funded in under 24 hours last time, so hopefully we can maybe get under 12 hours this time. Maybe that's a little much, but well, let's aim for that. So hopefully we'll have those links going out. And then hopefully we'll have the third issue out sometime in May or June, depending. And then we could probably figure about 4 months between issues, depending. Maybe they get a little bit faster. Maybe there's a little bit more time in between, but hopefully we'll have the whole thing done within, 2 to 3 years.
Awesome.
Some of these things take a little bit of time, but so for TSC Alpha, that's probably, you can figure about everything, aiming for 3 to 4 months per issue for the release schedule in that. And for things like TSC Ajax 4 and 5, and if anyone's been following our social media, has seen some pages from TSC Helena, which takes place before TSC Ajax 1, in the beginning of the Titan Wars. We should be having that dropping sometime in the spring of 2021 as well. And that should also be free online for everybody to read.
Nice. Yeah. And then how did you go about getting your Kickstarter funded so quickly, and, to get into some of your marketing angles and where you promoted it, how you promoted it, and strategy for anybody out there listening who has a project that they might want to Kickstarter, try to get funded?
Definitely. Number one would probably be have supportive friends that like you. That's probably number one. So if you don't have any friends, go learn how to make some. But all jokes aside, I would say we also had the Kickstarter. We've had our Instagram up for a long time. It's almost a year before we started. And we had also put out 3 issues for free on our website before we ever started to, approach the Kickstarter element. So I'd say number one, it would be have an audience, and not necessarily the biggest audience, but have an audience that you can have at least a little bit of some sort of, place to generate some views and some clicks for the algorithms from your different social medias, so that you can get a little bit more reach, but also so that you can have some people that hopefully support you, and initially will support you and will be down to, drop some money for you and see your project, because not only do they like you, that they like your story and like the stuff that you're putting out. So that'd probably be one. 2 would be something like, not to get too, and I've said that a lot, not to get too much of one of these things, but it'd probably be having some sort of landing page, right? And doing, spending advertisement money on the right places, right? You could spend money on an advertisement agency, I guess, but if you wanted to do it more indie, more on your own, looking for the right platforms for your project, and trying to find the right audiences through something like a Facebook advertisement, and make sure you have a good landing page. Make sure you have a follow link early. Don't launch your project a week after you put out the project link. You should give it maybe a little bit longer, because you don't have to wait till the last second to get that. You can get that pretty early. I would also make sure that you have the right tiers, right? You want to make sure you're hitting the people that want to support you a lot, but you also want to make sure that you have something for the people that are on the fence about spending even any money, but you don't want them to spend 0. You'd want to rather them spend 2 or 3 than nothing. So you make sure you have a tier for them, and then you have keep things. I know a lot of people try and get their as much money as you can from, marking up certain things. So, I mean, whatever your strategy is, I don't want to say one strategy is better than the other. I personally, I would never pay $10 for a digital anything. So, but I'll pay 25, but I'll definitely pay $25 for a physical book or something like that. Right. So make sure you're marking up the right things properly. Right. And making sure that you can meet those goals and sending those things out. I'd also probably recommend having the project finished, so you don't have to worry about deadlines too tough. But I know that can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're working on a budget and you don't want to, put too much money into a project before you have the A-OK that anyone even wants to see it. But that might be, put some backers that are I don't know if I can trust this thing that says it's not even finished and might come out in 3 months, but who knows?
Right. So for you, it was essentially a pre-sale.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure I had it all finished, because I'd rather not have, I want to, I'm a little bit an anxious person, so I like to have as little stress as possible. So
I feel that,
having the
yeah, for
book
sure.
done already is something I would definitely recommend. Not something that you can do always, obviously, but something, or having it closer to done than not.
Right.
And so, yeah, those
How,
would probably be the things and then using platforms like Reddit and, trying to find some Facebook groups, reaching out to people on Twitter, and just be friendly, and like, make sure you also support other people. That doesn't mean like, if you support them, they'll support you. But like, if you support no one, then no one listens. I mean, like, maybe somebody will support you, but like, you're kind of like a jerk. Like, this is something that we all are like, being creative and like, support other people. You can't think that everyone else sucks. I'm sure somebody's making a book that you want to buy. You don't have to support everyone, but like, take a look in the space that you want to be in, and look for people's books that you actually enjoy. Not only because you should be supporting them because you're supporting the scene, but two, because it'll teach you a lot of stuff about like how other people are doing Kickstarters. And that's like a huge thing too. You want to look at like what other people are doing, how, like, what tiers they have, how many updates they're doing, like how they're maximizing their SEO, how they're doing, like, what their stretch goals are. Do they even do stretch goals, et cetera, et cetera, and how? And so these are all something that are very important. And when you finally get the reward, you want to see how they shipped it, what kind of, packaging they shipped it in. Did it come damaged? Are you upset with it? Like, what would you do better to make your packaging did it not come very quickly? Were they too slow about it? Et cetera. So I would say those are the things that I would, if you want to do, have a good Kickstarter, do those things, and you should be okay. I'm not going to say you'll kickstart for like $20,000, but hopefully you'll hit your goal.
Yeah, I think it's all good advice. And how did you build your, I think people have trouble maybe accessing
Mm.
audience in the beginning.
Mm.
If you get some word of mouth traction,
Mm.
people who have similar interests might share it and the word will spread. But it's getting kind of initial eyes that are meant to see it and who the project will resonate with. So for you, I wonder, how did you get your audience initially for the webcomic before you were even kickstarting anything?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to give you all the tools of the trade. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can drop that secret. Um,
whatever
I
you're
would
willing to
say
share. Yeah.
I would say you have to make sure you have some sort of social media, and make sure you're active on that social media and trying to maximize. You learn about the algorithm. There's plenty of, like, comics aren't the only thing that people are trying to make go viral on social media. So make sure you take a look at how other people are maximizing their views, maximizing their reach. Because these things are super important, like how many hashtags you should use, which hashtags you should use if you're using something like Instagram or Twitter. What you like, should you even be spending money on promoted ads on those platforms and things like that? Are like, which platforms give you the best return and like the most eyes and things like that. And then just be active on the platform, posting not constantly, but posting a decent amount. I used to post in the beginning. I posted at every milestone. So it was like at 50 followers, I posted once. At 100, I posted again. At 200, and then eventually we started posting every day. So I mean, whatever, it's, you can make your own schedule, but I would say you have to be active, and you have to like try it. And by active, I mean, you also have to do like the reach yourself. Like, go find pages you like, go find people and art you like on those, or like if you're on Twitter, like look for personalities you like and like follow them and like their stuff, and like, comment on their stuff, because and do things like that. And sort of branch out, because especially with coronavirus, you can't get an initial audience from like people you meet at a Comic-Con, or there's no Comic-Con. So you have to like do that reach yourself, and sort of like, pretend like you're knocking on doors basically, and
Yeah.
spreading the word that way. And then hopefully eventually, the algorithm will start to help you out. Hasn't helped me out much recently.
I was going to ask
but
if you, not that you had to give me a secret, but if you were
yeah.
able to game, for lack of a better phrase, game the system, and
Mm.
by virtue of having studied a little bit and
Mm.
researched it, and trying to do your best to maximize the way
Definitely.
that you're
Mm.
promoting yourself, were you able to catch any wave based
Mm.
on those promotions and your understanding of the algorithms?
Oh, definitely. But the thing is, with platforms like, Instagram, they switch up their algorithms, relatively often. I wouldn't say super often, but they switch them up and things change. And so I'm sure any Instagram creator, and I'll speak most specifically towards that because that's the platform I use the most and probably have the most experience with this sort of marketing type for my comic. When it comes, like, they change what matters the most towards their algorithm. So I'm sure you've seen posts about like saving content is really important, or if you have a carousel, how long they think your eyes have been on that piece, right? If you go click through to the third piece in the carousel and then you look at it for 10 seconds, that's better than somebody that just clicked through all three and then maybe even liked and commented, but then just like looked at it within like 2 seconds and scrolled away, right? So there's these different things that you have to, do a little research on and like figure out the best ways to like maximize the like for the gaming. But like one would be trying to get a decent amount of likes in a certain amount of time, trying to get a lot of like activity being like saves, retweets, or people sending it towards their story and sharing it towards their story. Commenting helps a lot too, and those sort of things. Maybe tapping on it and like going to your profile and like clicking on your website afterwards. They give you analytics on that. So I mean, the best advice I can give, because since these things change, is you to test it for yourself, but also to do the right testing, you should have your account on like a business account so you can get analytics and stuff, and so you can study like what hashtags are working for you. What types of posts are doing well, which types of posts are doing not well, and things like that.
And also, I would say put your best foot forward, because
put your best foot forward.
The content itself is what's going to drive any and all of that activity. So you have to have a project, an image, whatever that will resonate with your audience. So just simply understanding the algorithm and posting won't do it. What you post is also vital. Definitely. From what I understand. I'm not saying I understand a lot, but I understand that.
Definitely. The content matters because you want them to save it. You want them to genuinely want to save your content. Right.
So, you don't want a passive scroll by, and keep scrolling. You want them to spend time because what they're seeing and what you're giving to them actually matters and resonates.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, your project obviously resonated with enough people and enough of an audience that you got funded. We're in hour and 15 in. I wonder if there's any other directions you want to take the conversation today.
No, it's totally up to you, man. This is what's your random podcast, not what's my random podcast.
Well, it's me asking you what's your random. So do you have any other projects that you are working on that you want to talk about at all?
So I don't want to talk about too much detail because, I think it'd be better if they're just a surprise, but I do want to shout out all of those artists. So at Monster Retina, who's doing the art for an upcoming manga web comic called Level Anima that will be having, we will have a website and we'll also have up on Webtoons. So be on the lookout for that. We have TSE Helena, like I said, that I'm doing with an awesome artist, Barak Kanoglu. So be on the lookout for that.
And how's that one going to be distributed?
That one will also be on a website for free. And so we'll have that on the SaturnEffect.com. Be on the lookout for TSE Alpha 2. That should be coming in February, kickstarting in February, probably sending out sometime in April. And then we have 2 other projects that we're working on in the background that I won't say too much about because, hopefully they we can see them where they need to be when they're done. But I will shout out the artists, Ricardo Secchi and Brian Escura, both really super talented, awesome artists. Also shouting out the artists to TSE Alpha, Francesco and Marco. All these guys really awesome, super talented, great guys. I love working with all of them. And so be on the lookout for all of those. And if you want to stay in tune and stay up to date, you can follow me on Twitter at Chris Moses or at the Saturn Effect. You can also follow me on Instagram at the Saturn Effect as well, and you'll get a bunch of updates there. And so if you're interested in Chris Moses' stories, we got a bunch coming. Hopefully we have plenty. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a super young guy, but we're young enough. So hopefully we got a couple decades, hopefully, of stories to come out. I'm not gonna say too much about or you're not gonna, who knows what the future has to hold for any of us. But hopefully, God willing, we got another decade or so at least.
And at the very least, taking it one step at a time, we could
Yeah.
look forward to
Yes.
Saturn Effect Alpha shipping
Yes.
based on your recently successful
Yes.
Kickstarter, and
Yes.
hoping to fund the future continuation of that project with the second issue coming at us, Kickstarter coming at us in February.
Yep.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining me again. And
thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And if you want to come on again and we could discuss more as more is revealed,
Of course.
I'd love to have you back. So
Definitely. Thanks for having me on. Until next time.
Until next time, enjoy your random. Hello, my fellow randoms, and welcome to the debriefing, the post-show discussion where I go through some key takeaways and areas where I think I could improve the podcast moving forward before I sign off. Key takeaways from today's episode were, I think, when Chris talked about starting and promoting his Kickstarter. A key piece of advice there is build an audience, get a captive audience, people who are interested in the project before you launch your Kickstarter and try to solicit funds. If you have a couple of flag bearers or torch bearers to, help promote your project, that's going to go a long way in getting more ears and eyes on the project. And Chris did so successfully, and in a short amount of time, he released some free web comics, generated some interest, and then he pivoted that and was able to successfully fund his Kickstarter. I think the turnaround time is quite impressive, and I think that is also in large part because his project is so compelling. It was fun talking to Chris about that and his layering of contemporary issues within the series and how he avoided directly addressing issues such as systemic racism and rather used allegoric stand-in examples that allow him to indirectly explore some more difficult ideas. I think that it's an interesting thing to consider as we process some of our contemporary issues and thoughts into our stories and our comics and our film scripts and all of the creative that we produce. So those are my two key takeaways. One being, again, Chris's advice for creating an audience, a small audience, before launching a fundraising campaign, and the second, using allegory to explore contemporary and contentious ideas and concepts and topics. So areas where I think I could improve the podcast. Today was a pretty smooth, pretty normal show, so nothing particularly jumps out at me there. So I'm going to let you go. That's a wrap up for today, my fellow randoms. Go check out Chris's project, The Saturn Effect. And until next time, enjoy your random.